This is the ALAUDA Aeronautics Mark III Speeder, and it aims to be the first racing drone to carry a human pilot on board. And Lexie Jansen wants to be that human pilot. Now, you probably know Lexie from her YouTube channel where she makes content about FPV drones and drone racing. But recently, she was hired by AirSpeeder, moved to Australia, and is now a full-time test pilot for the AirSpeeder.
Hi everyone, I'm Lexie Jansen, aka Mile High, FPV racing pilot, videographer, photographer, YouTuber, dear friend of Joshua Bardwell's, and currently also a racing pilot for flying cars for AirSpeeder.
My name's Harry. I'm an aerospace and software engineer at ALAUDA Aeronautics, the technical partner of AirSpeeder.
And I am super happy to have been invited to talk to you guys because this vehicle that is sitting behind you right now is probably one of the coolest things my gut wants to say coolest things in FPV because that's just what I say, but it's not really an FPV craft. And in some senses, it's not really an RC craft either, although you are flying it with RC and FPV these days. Is that right, Lexie?
Yes, that's absolutely right. We're flying it with HD0, and so it's absolutely remotely controlled right now.
Okay, so let's talk about this craft. And actually, that's why I'm glad Harry is here, because I want to get into the technical specs and capabilities of what this damn thing can do before we talk about how you got to be here flying it and what the hopes are for the future. Like, what does this mean? But let's just focus on the craft. I see that it has 8 motors, Harry. What can you tell us about the technical specs and capabilities?
Sure, yeah. So it is a octa-rotor, so coaxial, as you can see, just to allow for the most amount of propulsion that we can get with the space that we have. Probably an interesting note with the system is that if you see the top motors, they're actually on an angle to the bottom motors. And obviously an interesting artifact of that is at this scale, with an aircraft at this scale with aerodynamic forces, you actually need more yaw authority than you have on the smaller drones. You've got a lot more inertia at this size. So you'll notice that the top motors are on a bit of an angle to the bottom. That's not so conventional on a drone. So that's to improve our yaw authority, actually. So an interesting little artifact there. In terms of the chemistry of the batteries, we're running a lithium polymer battery similar to what you see in the FPV world, running at 58.8 volts, high current system. In terms of ESCs, we run 300 amp ESCs, which are current limited in software. So the props are a 32-inch prop.
What does it weigh?
Okay, in terms of all up weight, when the aircraft is fully loaded, it's 150 kilos. So it's heavy.
And what
this gives you an idea of scale.
What kind of thrust to weight ratio? What kind of thrust does it make?
At the moment, the thrust to weight ratio would be, it's around 3 to 1, if I'm correct. I have to check those numbers again, but around 3 to 1, yeah.
A lot less than in very small quads, we see somewhere between maybe 8 and 12 to 1. They're super powerful. Yeah. But 3 to 1 is respectable for an aircraft?
Yeah. So I generally, for VTOL control, I think you're wanting above 1.2 for controllability. To ensure in VTOL you're able to combat all the disturbances. So yeah, look, one thing that we've learnt, a big lesson, and especially for people like Lexie coming in, is that these aircraft, what separates them from a normal FPV drone is actually that they fly, very differently to a small FPV drone. You've got so much more inertia, so much more momentum. So it's funny when you see these things, you expect them to flick around like an FPV drone, but they actually fly in a very coordinated manner, like a fixed-wing aircraft. So
I flipped it in the simulator now.
Hopefully in the simulator, and that's it.
It's all well and good for Harry to tell us all these specs, but you have actually gotten to fly this aircraft. How familiar was this AirSpeeder to you with the first time you flew it compared to one of your racing drones? Or how different?
Well, the first time I actually compared it to a Cinewhoop. It's a little bit more stable and it's of course slower. So I tried doing a lot of stuff in the simulator first. So I started with, going straight, trying to turn, and it felt a little bit more sluggish, which of course makes sense. I mean, it's a 150 kilograms big thing. I don't know how much it is in pounds. So add it somewhere in the screen.
We could put that on screen.
Yeah, put it on screen because I have no idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, it flies a little bit more sluggish, but also the thing is that, I mean, it's supposed to kind of like, I saw it coming, but I'm pretty familiar with it. It feels really like a really big Cinewhoop, and you can slalom it. I already tested. It can flip. Of course, Brett and Grant are really bad because of this. They're like, don't do it. And trust me, I will. One day eventually we'll just...
So they haven't let you flip it yet, is what you're saying?
No, they haven't let me flip it. Although I was asking, like, can I flip it? And they're like, no. So don't worry, we'll get there. But it does flip in the simulator.
So they've got a dedicated simulator specifically to let you learn how to fly and learn how this flies. They didn't just cut you loose and say, here, go, give it a whirl.
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing. First, we started doing simulator with our RC controllers, just, FrSky, Radio Master, whatever. But we're switching to HOTAS. So we will have literally like pedals for yaw, one big throttle like in the aircraft, and roll and pitch on the other joystick. So it's actually pretty much a lot of fun.
There must have been so much pressure on you. I was going to say the first time you flew it, but frankly, every time you fly it. And again, I'll go back to my experience with my Beast class, which was a $1,500 quadcopter. But every time I flew it, I was so concerned that I was going to crash. What are you allowed to say what one of these would cost if you crashed it and totaled it?
I'm afraid that if I crash it and total it, we'll all lose our jobs. So no pressure, Lexie, but...
Right. It's not just the cost of one aircraft, but the implications for the program as a whole.
So there's a lot of pressure when it goes to licensing, safety, and we're having so many things around safety that it's actually like hard to crash it because we have a lot of redundancy also inside. So no worries there. We're fine. I won't crash it.
Well, let's talk about that. Well, let's talk about that because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, like, is this just an acro drone that you could fly into the ground? Or does it have things like altitude control, speed limiting, position hold, safety, airbags? I don't know. What kind of safety protocols are in place with this aircraft?
Yeah. So you mentioned a few. So of course, yes, we have a lot of, so at the moment when we're in our testing program, we don't actually fly in acro mode. So that's might be interesting for some. It's very much a safety point of view at the moment. So while we're dealing with tuning the aircraft, understanding a lot of its dynamic responses, which are vastly different from a small-scale FPV drone, we have to have it in stabilized mode because there's a lot of things that these new FPV pilots that come in wouldn't expect because it does handle differently. We have position modes. So as you said, we use a mix of actually real-time kinematic corrections on the GPS system. We have radar altimeters. We've got an array of sensors such as barometric sensors. That's pretty standard. We fuse all of that, and then we can have this system, basically appear like it's on a string. It sits dead still, even in wind disturbances. So that's another safety mode. So for example, when the pilots actually come in to land, they will land in position mode. So they'll go from stabilized to position. And that ensures that the vehicle's not walking as they're coming into a landing. Of course, we also have our autonomous functions. Why wouldn't you? So, we've got our return to launch functions. We've got auto land. And of course, we take fail-safes very, very seriously. That's probably, when we design the aircraft, fail-safe is pretty much on the top of our list. So we go into sort of every single permutation, understand what events can cause the aircraft to do what. So for example, link losses, what happens if the link is lost and then comes back? And we ensure that the aircraft is going to, come back home safely, essentially.
Well,
so there's a lot of safety.
You mentioned that it's octo configuration, and of course that's for redundancy, so you could lose one or more motors and still be able to return home or land safely. Are you able to talk about any other, like, I'm sure people are wondering, do you have redundant receivers? Do you have redundant flight controllers? Do you have redundant ESCs? I don't know. What other levels of redundancy are in place that we wouldn't expect on a smaller drone?
Yeah, so one redundancy would definitely be the way in which the powertrain architecture is laid out. So I'll start with the batteries. So the batteries have a level of redundancy where essentially the top layer are controlled by one battery, which is separated on each end. So the front top motors, they've got one cell which powers them. The bottom motors have a different cell. So we've done that for a very good reason. Of course, battery failures, they do happen. Lithium polymer chemistry is not always that stable. So we do that for a good reason. So there's redundancy in the packs. If a battery fails, we've still got at least one layer of motors on the front or rear. So yeah, that's the first. In terms of flight control, so we have a triple redundant IMU system, so we can ensure that we're getting non-corrupted data. Yes, and in terms of telemetry links, an important one is that we have fail-safe and kill systems. Bit of a crude word to say, but a kill system that works on a completely separate telemetry band, and it runs through a completely different mechanism. So, for example, you'll all be familiar with how you've got a kill switch on your flight controller or on your transmitter, which sends a signal through to the flight controller itself. We actually have a totally external kill system, which runs on a completely different frequency band, and that actually isolates the batteries using mechanical contactors. So pretty much, if we had to kill the aircraft, and yes, so it's a very mechanical system, very, very sort of brute force commercial grade.
There's just like a giant relay that cuts the batteries off. So in the worst case scenario, the aircraft couldn't possibly fly away.
Exactly right. Yep. So that is worst case. Obviously, that's like no one wants to press the big red button, but it's there if we need. So
under a plastic cover, I assume.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't think anyone would be surprised that if you crashed a manned aircraft or injured a pilot, that would be a big deal. Or that if you crashed and you an unmanned aircraft in a way that injured a person on the ground, obviously those would be big deals. I do think people are going to say, look, if you're going to race these things, surely there's going to be, like they say in Ricky Bobby, right? Rubbin's Racing. I don't know if you know that line.
Exactly.
There's going to be a higher potential for crashes. How can you race them, but also you can't take the risk of crashing them?
We kind of think that we will crash. I mean, everyone crashes. Formula One crashes. We will crash as well. We have some redundancy systems. We have some safety systems. So on the screen, when we have our OSD, which we call the HUD, we will get an information that's showing us on the screen that there is something, like we have one thing, which is like a little circle on the HUD, and it shows us where the other speeders are. So it's not like with a normal racing when you're just flying and all of a sudden there's someone coming from above you and you're having a heart attack, because you will know that there is someone in there because of this little screen there, as well as there's like a line that shows you that there is something on top of you, below you, on the sides. So we will see where other people are. So that's kind of like a safety feature.
It occurs to me to wonder, Lexie, when you're flying FPV, is it a fixed camera? Is it a gimbal camera? Can you literally look around? Or is it just a fixed camera?
No, it's a fixed FPV camera, but on HUD we have all the information about all the other speeders. So that's kind of like knowing what's going on around you. So spatial awareness is there. So it's a safety feature for us. It's a safety feature for the speeders and for everyone around as well.
Of course. Well, I mean, there's no better time than now. What kind of interesting stuff are you doing with the HUD?
Yeah. So it'd be a great time to talk about Telstra Purple. So Telstra Purple are our technical partner with this system. So they not only help us with our telemetry system, some of the fail-safe systems, but they're helping us with this really experimental and really interesting new FPV system. So typically in FPV races, you have actual physical banners, gates to fly through, right? Basically. So in our system, it's a bit more exciting, and we're going to the next level, sort of trying to push this more futuristic feel. So we actually have 3D elements injected into the FPV feed at real time. We have HUD information, and it's sort of this amazing example of distributed systems all coming together, where we can have virtual gates, virtual pit lanes over the FPV feed with low latency. So that's actually that's what we're going to be using in the race that's coming up. So it's really exciting. I've seen it myself in action out in the field, and it's a bit of a game changer. Quite incredible.
Yeah, that's always been a real challenge. People have tried to do that before with hobby drones, and the lack of accurate position information, as well as low latency AR technology, has always made it a challenge. But obviously, you guys have incredibly accurate position information and a lot of money to throw at that problem. It's got to be nice knowing that there's no actual gate for you to crash into.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, as opposed to having that sort of real life warning, we actually have a series of pilot warnings. So if they miss a gate, If they
Right.
breach a perimeter, they'll actually get a whole bunch of messages on their screen. We have a similar, we've sort of based a lot of this off of Formula One. So the architecture of the warnings, the flags, it's all really based on Formula One, which is actually quite cool because ultimately, we are the Formula One of the skies. So why not base it off of what they're doing?
Nice.
So yeah, it's really interesting to see how we can build up this sort of virtual environment and, optimize the workloads for these pilots so that they can fly as safely and as competitively as possible.
Lexie, as long as we're talking about racing, I think people really want to hear about how you got here. Like, from my own personal perspective, I know you as a YouTuber, a content creator, a drone racer. And one day on Facebook, you kind of mysteriously said you were moving, and then you announced that you had this job. And it's like, how did you find this job?
Well, my process was actually that they found me. I got this really mysterious email on my inbox, which was saying, hey, we would like to basically pay you for racing and becoming the best pilot you can ever be. And I was like, okay, that's really vague. Sounds great.
You must have been suspicious because you get all these emails as a YouTuber, and all of them are scams.
I get those a lot. I do get those a lot. It's like, let's set up a girl team, which is happening like since 2015. And I'm always like, yeah, let's do it. So it was a really vague email. And I was like, okay, but what does it mean? But the email also said that then you have to move to Australia. And I was like, okay, Australia was never on my list. But okay, can you tell me more? Because I mean, 2 lines of text don't give me much, which Rob's probably going to watch it. So, hey, Rob. How are you doing? And I was stupid because I didn't even click because it was saying like AirSpeeder and I didn't click it because I was like, okay, this is really vague. Probably it's a scam. And the guy came back to me and he wrote like a huge text about what they're going to do. And that it's a flying car, that they want me to fly it remotely first as I do my normal racing, but also to get inside of the thing. And then I was reading through this text and I remember just looking at it like, what is this even? And then I finally scrolled and clicked the AirSpeeder and I went through like this rabbit hole of just going through the Instagram, YouTube, websites, all the kind of stuff that I could find on Google. And I was like, I want to do it. It's going to be great. Right.
Well, how excited and or terrified are you for the day when they go, okay, we're ready to do it. It's time to climb in and fly it for real.
I'm excited. I think all of my family is excited. Aren't you excited to see me inside? The first time I'm in, I'm going to totally be humming Imperial March and put a GoPro in so everyone can see it. I'm going to do that. Totally. It's just awesome. I'm excited.
I know that you can't give a definite answer and it depends on many things, but how far out are we? Are we from this actually being manned? Like theoretically, how soon could we see somebody flying one of these?
I think Harry would be a better person to answer this, but generally the thing is, I also need to get licensed as a pilot, as I think it's commercial pilot in general. So this will take at least a year or 2 to make it happen for us. But at the current stage, we are having a test pilot that's going to be testing the manned version, but I think rests for Harry.
Right. So at the moment, we're actually commencing our manned program this year. So when I say that, we're actually starting to design the manned system. So it's exciting. We've actually already started to specify and have actually placed orders for some of the crash structures, so the central structure of the system. So it's actually happening as we speak. We've got a whole team. We've got consultants over in overseas, some that have come from Formula One, some that have come from the aerospace background that are actually working on the design, both aerodynamics and structural, looking at crash structures. So it is all happening. So with that in mind, we're really looking at getting someone into the seat at the end of this year, which is really exciting, or towards the start of next year. That's the timeline.
I am incredibly excited to see what the future holds for AirSpeeder, for the Racing League, and Lexie, for you personally. Where can people find out more and follow what's going on?
So you guys can go to AirSpeeder's Instagram and YouTube. They put a lot of stuff, of course. And you can also go to all the pilots. So it's Fabrizi, Zeppelin, I think he is. And of course, to my place, my on high, I'm posting weekly vlogs from here. So you can see like my first day here, how did I get here? And there will be my first flight and all that type of thing. So it's going to be super exciting, a lot of vlogs. And yeah, just follow it on my on high everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll put links to all that stuff down in the video description so people can follow. Well, this is really amazing, and I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What are you doing in here? The least you could do is subscribe or join my Patreon or, like, just here's another video I picked out for you. Jeez.